Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the first game Saturday, 1 o'clock. Chiefs favored right now by 3.5. The sleeper app that we use for our contest, that locks in on Tuesday. The Texans were favored by 2.5 at that point, with some assumption that I think Mahomes was going to be hurt. But he's been a full participant at practice. One of the world's greatest healers, Sam, Patrick Mahomes. He's either just really dramatic when he gets hurt or a great healer, somewhere in between. But every time it looks like he can't even walk, he just comes back and plays anyway.
I don't even know if it's particularly good healing as much as the man's just willing to play through the type of injury that would normally keep guys out. I mean, that playoff run when he had the high ankle sprain, he couldn't move, really. Like, he couldn't get around. It wasn't like, oh, he's actually okay. You know, it was obviously over-dramatizing the injury. Like, he was badly hurt and was somehow able to mitigate that by just playing in a completely different way. Like, genuinely phenomenal play by him to not let that affect his game in a massive way. But I think that was real. Like, it wasn't rapid healing. He was just playing through an injury that most quarterbacks wouldn't. And somehow, like, the reason he was able to do that is because, or more to the point, the reason most quarterbacks wouldn't is because most quarterbacks would not be able to maintain a high level of play with that kind of encumbrance of an injury. For some, that's what made Mahomes amazing, is he was able to play like he wasn't particularly hurt. So I think he can go out there. I was tweeting back and forth with Ryan Fitzpatrick a bit about this. And it's like, to me, I think I would sit him in this game because you've got this stretch of, tough games, tough opponents, tough pass rushes, and there's no space for this ankle to heal. And okay, you are still fighting for that number one seed, which is important, but Mahomes being upright is more important, right? So I would probably sit him in this game. And Fitzpatrick made the point, well, it's not like it's the first time, right? We saw him in that playoff run. He's done this before. What I do think is new is this would be the first time he's had to do this with a massive problem on one spot of the offensive line, right? He's never had to do this before where the left tackle was a turnstile, and that's currently the dynamic at play, regardless of who they put out there, whether it's Wanye Morris, whether it's Sua Mataia, or whether it's last week's plan of throwing left guard Joe Thuney out there and asking him to man the left tackle spot, which weakens left tackle and left guard from the guy that has to step in. So that is new. Right now we've got Mahomes going out there. I do think he'll be able to play. I do think he'll be able to play well, but he will be somewhat hobbled and has pressure coming consistently because he's going up against the Houston pass rush.
And I mentioned too, in that 22 run, it did feel like the offensive line just stepped up in a special way. The interior of the offensive line, they were giving him extra room. He plays a little bit differently. Why did he get hurt on Sunday? There was pressure, but he kept moving into pressure, stepping into it, trying to make plays while getting hit. He doesn't avoid contact, right? He waits till the last second to get the throw off. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Got hurt the other day in part because, he's having to maneuver pressure. I think it does make him play within structure a little bit more. I think when he's hobbled, I actually think that could work in Mahomes' favor this weekend, and especially against the Texans pass rush, right? So I think Mahomes is gonna force himself to play within rhythm a little bit more, right? Get to 1 to 2 to 3 instead of just 1 to 2, and then hey, let's go make magic happen. So I think that could be an advantage. A lot of moving parts here too. The left tackle situation that you mentioned, DJ Humphries hasn't practiced yet. If he comes back, still hasn't played a full game in over a year. Joe Thuney kicking out, that does hurt the interior. You've got Donnell Hunter, Will Anderson on the other side. Guys like Danico Autry who could push the pocket. He caused some problems last week, with the Texans defense causing a lot of pressure. And then you have Hollywood Brown back at practice. He signed a 1-year deal this offseason. Remember the narrative coming into the year. Hollywood Brown's a deep threat. Xavier Worthy's a deep threat. These guys are going to help Mahomes stretch the field, coming off a year where he had the second worst passer rating on 20-plus yard throws in the NFL. We haven't been able to see both of those guys on the field. And by the way, DeAndre Hopkins wasn't in the mix when all of this was going down. So fascinating season for Kansas City, surviving all of this to be 13-1 at this point, getting Marquise Brown back into the mix. We'll see how rusty he is as well, but it seems like Kansas City at least they certainly have more dudes to worry about on the outside for Houston, who's given up a lot of big play opportunities.
Yeah. You've got Houston's got this fascinating defense where their pass rush is nasty. They will give up some big plays, but you've also got, if you test Derek Stingley, you run the risk of a big turnover in the opposite direction. Like Derek Stingley, I mean, CJ Stroud was talking about how he's trying to convince Derek Stingley to play offense, right? He thinks his ball tracking ability in the air is like as good as anybody's ever seen. I don't know if I go quite that far, but it's really, really good for a DB. Like Derek Stingley is up there with, Trayvon Diggs, guys like that as maybe the most dangerous or risky cornerback in the NFL to test, because if the ball is slightly off, it could be picked and taken the other way.
I highlighted last week against the Dolphins too. Kamari Lassiter, 4'6", 40 corner. Stuff we talk about during draft time and never talk about during the season, but I'll bring it up here. Marquise Brown is a sub 4.4 guy. Xavier Worthy is the fastest guy. If you get those guys one-on-one, does the speed actually matter?
Right.
I think it's overrated generally, because if you're a good corner, you play physical enough, you know your limitations, but just something to keep an eye on when the Chiefs take those downfield shots.
It only matters if the guy allows himself to be in a position where it matters. Like, I mean, we saw it with Cam Taylor-Britt, right? If you get a hand on him, 4.2 doesn't mean anything because you've immediately taken away his ability to run cleanly at that speed by you. If you don't get a hand on him, that's when it matters. So, like, Lassiter is fine unless he puts himself in a position where he allows Worthy to have a completely clean run where he doesn't touch him. Then 0.4 of a second in the 40 is a significant problem, particularly if you then have to try and recover in the air. That's the scenario where it's a problem. Like if you can get the free release, if you can get him with a run at Lassiter where he doesn't get a hand on him, then he can be toast. But otherwise, you can absolutely offset. I mean, Richard Sherman is maybe the best ever at this, right? Where there's a ton of wide receivers that would have absolutely smoked Richard Sherman one-on-one in a foot race. But Sherman never let that happen because it was impossible to run around him without him getting his hands on you at some stage in some way, which slows you up. And you're never able to just get that running start clean by him.
Last thing on that side of the ball, Texans pass rush, they're going to have to make an impact in this game. And if they do, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but when Mahomes was playing through the ankle, I don't think the Bengals in the AFC Championship got after him all that well. The Eagles could barely get any pressure on him on that slippery field in Arizona.
Right.
In that game, the Jags, when he was playing through it in the divisional round, like the game that he got hurt, they weren't getting any pressure. So if Houston actually does get pressure on Mahomes, look, does he play through it? Does he still maneuver? He's still great at avoiding sacks, but he's also got the highest sack rate of his career this year.
Yeah.
He's been less good at that this year. If they could sack him 4, 5, 6 times, doesn't matter if you have Marquise Brown out there. On the other hand, if Marquise Brown is open quick, those guys are open quick, that mitigates the pressure. So that side of the ball, those matchups are all going to be really interesting to watch. Other side, Houston's pass protection. There's a reason why they've regressed offensively. Pass protection's been terrible. CJ Stroud's regressed in turn with that. Running game has been pretty good. It does feel like the Texans have to play their game. The Joe Mixon gets 27 carries. They're all 4.5. He's averaging 4.5 a pop, and they're controlling the clock and slowing down the entire game, which actually is how KC likes to play these days. Actually,
right.
So
they're kind of. I mean, the offensive line I think is the big limiting factor for the Texans in terms of weapons. They're kind of back to where they should be. Nico Collins is back in the action. He looks spectacular still. Joe Mixon is back. Tank Dell is still there. The only thing that they're missing is Stephon Diggs, who obviously is done for the year. But generally, the weaponry is kind of where it's supposed to be and looking a little bit better because of that. The offensive line, though, they're still shuffling it around. They're still, making changes. Blake Fisher has come in at right tackle. Titus Howard is now playing left guard. Like, they can't solve that interior, particularly the left side, the left guard center axis has been a problem for them. And it's not getting fixed. Like, they don't have the personnel. Like, at some point, I think they're just going to have to settle on a combination of 5 and hope that improves as they keep going. But now that 5 has got to block Chris Jones, right? That's not going to go well.
Charles Omenihu back the last few weeks as well with his length, difficult to block. I mean, I think both teams are going to have trouble protecting the quarterback, and it'll come down to which QB will make some plays under pressure, which playmakers are going to be make some special plays.
I mean, remember when the Houston Texans played the Jets, right? Quinnen Williams, who actually hasn't been that great this year relative to previous years, went absolutely nuts against this interior offensive line from the Texans. Like, he was the guy that forced them to completely reshuffle. Like, the two guys we've been trying at guard, neither one of those guys is an option going forward. They got wrecked so hard by Quinnen Williams. Chris Jones is A, better than Quinnen Williams, and B, has been better this year. I mean, if it's anything like that, that rendered this offense completely non-functional.
All right, man. Let's make some picks here. Again, earlier in the week, if you're on the Sleeper app, you had Houston favored.
Right.
So you're probably going to take Kansas City as the underdog because that line was Mahomes-less.
Yeah.
Now they're favored by 3.5. Using that line, who would you take here?
Right. If you're in the Sleeper app, I think it's a no-brainer. You're taking the Chiefs. Even without it, even with the line going to where it is now, I still think the Chiefs end up covering this one, bizarrely, though I'm intensely nervous that Mahomes behind that, not even just with the left tackle situation, is a massive problem.
I'm going to take Houston because Harry's taking Kansas City, so we're going to stick contrarian.
Naturally.
I like Houston a little bit in this game anyway. I honestly think that the injury, and usually, it often ends up making Mahomes play a cleaner brand of football.
I think that's a good point.
And I think that could work in his favor here.
I do genuinely think that that's a good point. And this is another thing, another reason Mahomes is as good as he is. Like, not many quarterbacks can completely change the way they play the game for whatever reason, right? Whether it's defense, circumstances. Like, it takes a genuinely great quarterback to be like, I like doing it this way, but the best way to win is a different way this weekend for whatever reason. Mahomes has already shown he can do that. Like, he can adapt his game when the injury means he can't be the regular Mahomes. I just worry that even with playing in that style, the left tackle problem is too big.
Yeah, that's all fair. So you and Harry will take Kansas City. I will take Houston.
Yep. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.